And then, you know, if we need to, if you're worried about something that you've said in terms of a pitch, or if you want to save specific discussions about your work until the end, then I can just edit that out towards the end if you're worried that, you know, you don't necessarily want to share everything that you're doing up to this point with everybody else. So, okay, hi to all the IP law people. This is the midterm break, and we are just doing a drop-in Zoom to address any queries, concerns, issues you might be having with the assignment. So I don't necessarily have a format that I want to use. I guess starting with the basics, are you reasonably comfortable with where you're at right now in terms of consolidating your knowledge that you have on the basic IP rights so that you can then go about tackling one of those two broad questions?
Yeah, that's fine, like getting across the work and that kind of thing. It's just being able to narrow down for research. I haven't done any research papers yet. It's been the way of finding stuff through the library, that kind of thing.
Right, so you haven't done the legal research unit just yet. Okay, have you had a little look at Scott Beattie's little research primer that I've put up online? I might just quickly share that.
I'm also doing mine next term, Tanya.
Oh, you're doing the legal research unit?
Yeah, next term.
Okay, cool. Well, this will be a good kind of entree into all of that. Now, I don't know whether you had a little look, whether you've read it like front to back or anything like that, but
I did print it out and have a good read of it.
Yeah, it's quite useful. It's quite useful. But what you'll see down on, I really like this graphic on page, because a lot of it is pitched at, you know, writing RX and stuff. But if you have a little look down on page here, so this is page 29. And he goes through like a mind map of how to go about exploring the process of writing a good research paper. And if you think about the broad problems, you've kind of, the way that I've drafted those two assignment questions, I'll just put that down here for a second. I'll go to the unit profile and then I'll go to the assessment tasks. So, group discussion. Okay. Intellectual property, here we are. Intellectual property rights have overstepped the bounds of reasonableness and cannot be justified in their present form. So you've got a proposition there that you need to either argue for or against. Okay. Obviously, that argument is not going to be purely from personal opinion. Okay. You need to conduct your own legal research and you need to be able to support your viewpoint very nicely with the legal research that you do, okay? So it's a broad proposition that you are either going to agree with or disagree with. And then if you agree with it, like I said, you're going to have to find sufficient support and use that in your argument. Or if you disagree with it, then you're going to have to go through the same process. Something similar, but this one is a little, and I have had some queries on this one. What is the key priority for reform of the Australian IP law system? So choose one of the reforms and then track implementation and then justify, sorry, that's my dog, justify your support or otherwise for the current approach with your research. Okay, so there's a fair bit of latitude in both of those broad things, but you're doing something slightly different in each one. For the second one, instead of arguing for or against a proposition and trying to sustain your viewpoint, for the second one, it probably gives you a little bit more latitude in terms of the reform that you want to focus on, and you're not actually trying to say that it's a valid reform or not a valid reform. You are saying why it's a key priority. Okay, so you need to demonstrate the urgency for reform. All right, so I have had someone ask me, for example, with this one, can I just give you an overview of the reforms that are happening, okay, that were proposed by the Productivity Commission and that, have been legislated or are on the drafting board to be legislated. Now, I think let's just go back here. If you look here, that would not, for example, pass an evaluative stage. Okay, what we are looking for in a good research paper is not what we would call mere reportage. Mere reportage. That is just telling someone what the state of play is. Okay? Because most people will be able to, for example, if I put a newspaper in front of you and said, read this article and tell me the key point of that article, probably most people could tell you what the key point of an article is. It doesn't take a whole lot of nous to read something purely for its comprehension value and regurgitate it. What we are looking for at this stage of the game is a decent level of critical analysis. And you're going to get sick of hearing me say critical analysis, critical analysis, critical analysis. But it is one of the skills that will be absolutely vital for you in your future career, whether or not you actually end up practicing in law. And it's the one thing that is not really, I guess, explicitly drawn to the fore when you are doing things like IRACs. Because, yes, IRACs will require you to analyse the cases that you have looked at and perhaps make a judgment call about which way a court would be likely to leap given a particular factual scenario. It's pushing that skill a bit more to the next level to say, here's a proposition, form a viewpoint, and then get support for your viewpoint and argue it well. It's scaffolding it. So when you first come in and you're doing contract A and B, you know, the problems are quite crystal clear, and usually the lecturer will take parts of a couple of different cases and pop them into the problem facts for you. And then you just have to scout through the problem facts. And then you go, oh, yeah, I can see she's talking about this case and that case. And then reason by analogy what the answer should be if the matter ended up in court. That's one step along the way. That's reasoning by analogy. That's one step on the scaffold then to get you to the next level, which is to look more broadly in the literature at a particular legal problem and work out what problem you want to talk about and then support the problem, your view of the problem, okay? Trying then to convince the reader that your view is correct. So over the course of your degree and as you come to the end of your degree, this is more the focus of where we are kind of collectively driving your skills to that next level, okay? Now, if you want to do honours, it's all about this stuff. And as I said, when you get out there into practice, it will be all about this stuff. And even if you're not practicing directly in law, if you're going into something like a government job or in-house, same kind of thing. You're going to need this kind of more general critical thinking skill plus the legal research skill to back up what you've got to say about something. So when Scott goes through what's the core problem you want to solve, well, we've got a couple of very broadly worded problems here. So even though there are two problems there, you kind of have to drill down still using Scott's map to work out exactly the problem it is that you want to solve, or perhaps what I would say for this assignment, the position that you wish to sustain from your audience, okay? The position that you wish to convince your audience about, okay? Why should the reader care? Now, that is something that is going to have to be addressed in both of those questions, but particularly in the second one where you're talking about key priorities, you're going to have to tell the reader there's this urgency, aren't you? And that's why they need to care about whatever it is that you're saying is the key priority for reform. We don't really need to think about key questions, but what you do need to think about possibly are 1 to 3 issues that you may wish to talk about. For those people that are thinking of the first question, IP rights have overstepped the bounds of reasonableness, I had a great one last time round, and she looked at copyright law, and she took, I think it was 3 different areas of copyright law, for example. I can't remember off the top of my head what they were, but I think it was something like copyright term, fair dealing, and something else. And by her discussion of those 3 issues, wove her narrative through each of those 3 issues to then arrive at the conclusion that copyright had in fact overstepped the bounds of reasonableness. Okay, so you're looking to still, whilst you don't have that IRAC format, you're looking at posing the main question, breaking it down in your introduction to just flagging for the reader what issues you're going to step them through on the way to proving that your viewpoint is correct, and going through all of those, bringing your narrative through and coming to your conclusion. So it's the old adage, isn't it, really? In the introduction, say what you're going to say, then you go and say it, and then in the conclusion, you say what you've said. Okay? Sounds fairly simple, but this map is a pretty good way of fleshing it all out. You don't have to, in our exercise, you don't really have to worry too much about what drives difference of opinion, although, you know, you can sprinkle through your discussion that there are different opinions to yours, and you may wish to perhaps show why they are not as valid as your particular opinion on that particular issue, for example. That brings to mind one I did have, which was a good one, it was on patent law, and it was on gene patenting. Okay. And they had a particular view about gene patenting, and they set up all of the contrary arguments to their particular viewpoint, and then they shot them all down one by one. Okay, that's another way of going about it. And that one also got an HD as well. So the second thing, the survey. Well, here you're looking for obviously you've, in the first bit, you've honed down the issues that you are interested in and that you wish to talk about. And then you're going to do your literature search, or what Scott's called the survey. What do the experts have to say? Where do they disagree? This is when you're looking for finding your voice on a particular issue, okay? Often, step number 1 and step number 2 kind of go hand in hand. Often, it won't really be until you've done a literature review or a literature search, done enough reading around the problem, that you can then step back to step 1 and really fossick out the key issues that you are interested in and that you wish to talk about. In terms of, and I'm assuming that everyone, you know, knows how to do database searching. If not, we can talk about that in a second. Then Scott says, well, explore your paths, okay? Focus on the unexplored areas. This is if you're going to be writing an original research paper that might get published, for example. So you're looking at new or novel areas that get thrown up with interesting questions that perhaps are not directly addressed by what's already out there in the literature. And he suggests, you know, exploring, you know, the different alternatives, you know, that might be formed, the views that might be formed on these unexplored areas. Establish the evidence if you can. Talk about differences of opinion, use theory to explore reasons. That doesn't apply to us perhaps quite so much in this particular assignment, because you've got those two broad propositions that you are working within. So I've given you quite a nice little, what I've basically done is there's a huge landscape of potential legal research out there, and by giving you these two little broad questions, I've kind of fenced off a paddock for you, and you can then go and paddle about in that little paddock of literature to then hone in on the issues that you wish to discuss. I'm not asking you to go through all the literature that's out there on any one particular IP right, as this would suggest, and then find novel problems that you can then talk about, if you know what I mean. So this is what Scott's proposing is, I guess, the next level up again, if you know what I mean. Commit to a decision on each key question and back it up with evidence. That's just your decision time, where you are going to go with your discussion of issues. Have you got enough evidence to support your views? Then you're going to start fleshing out your actual argument that will form the basis of your paper. The most important thing to do, and I kind of launched into this discussion by saying we don't want to see at this stage of the game just mere reportage, okay? We don't want to see you just regurgitating the state of play on any particular issue. I think there's probably more of a risk of that in the second question, and that's why I've specifically said, someone's asked me, can I just tell you this is an overview of what's being proposed? And I've said no, because we need to have in all of this, what I will be looking for is your voice, your perspective and opinion on these two questions that I posed, this one of these two essay problems. Okay, I need to hear your voice coming through in the argument. A lot of students are very worried about, am I going to be right on this? Am I going to be wrong on this? From my point of view, I have given HDs to people that have a diametrically opposed view to me on all of this. If they've argued well and cogently, and they have given me some excellent legal research. Okay? So it's all about, and this is why I say it scaffolds off of that IRAC skill. Here, we're not trying to convince a client that this is the way a court would go or wouldn't go. We're trying to convince a readership, well, here's this proposition, in the case of the first question, or this this idea of a key priority in the second question, and you are taking your reader through a number of issues, 1 to 3 issues for each of those, either question, whichever question you're doing, and you are bringing your narrative through each discussion of each of those 1 to 3 issues, arriving at a nice conclusion that sums up what it is that you've been trying, the argument you've been trying to make. Does that, I'll stop sharing for a second. Does that make sense? Does it add anything? Do you have questions?
I suppose my one question is, I'm doing copyright for my group assignment and just wanted to make sure that I can include some copyright information if I'm doing a general sort of study of all of IP.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yes, sure. As long as you're not trying to recycle your research from one assignment into another. So I can't have someone doing copyright fair dealing and then doing the overstepping the bounds of reasonableness and then talking about nothing but fair dealing. Do you know what I mean? I would probably also have some reservation if it played, even a really significant part in in. So if you're going to be talking about a number of different IP rights, I'm happy for that, because obviously you're splitting your focus in the course of your discussion, and it will be just one of the planks in your argument. If that's the way that you're going to do it, I'm happy for that to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Not really. Are we feeling kind of comfortable with all of that? The main thing that I guess I'm looking for is a boldness in being able to state your view and support it well and come to a conclusion. Okay? Like I said, this is, when you're doing a PhD, they tell you narrative is everything. You have to have your voice. You have to have your central theme that you pull through every chapter of your thesis. And a little mini 2,000-word essay is really not that different. In fact, the need for a central theme is even more clear. So what I'm looking for is a nice, clear statement up front of what it is that you're going to argue for. Say what you're going to say, you know, that 1 to 3 issues. I'm happy for you to do just one issue and make it a sustained treatment so that you can go into it in more depth. Or I'm happy for you, like I said, to do a bit of a cook's tour thing. But either way you tackle it, you're going to need to make that, there's going to have to be a decision time. What interests me? What 1 to 3 issues will I discuss within that narrow paddock that AJ's mapped out for me, being either, you know, the broad question number 1 or the broad question number 2. In that little paddock, where am I going to put my effort? And how can I pull through my argument the best? What can I use to support my argument? Okay, that's about the best advice that I can give. Please don't just, for example, this is one student last time round on the I was stepping, there was something similar, a similar kind of general question that I asked them to do, and they found what they thought was a really brilliant article that made the point that they wanted to make. And they basically, their paper was an explanation of the other person's paper. Can you see that? That really is not showing me your view. Now, if you have a view and you find a great support for it, don't be afraid to use that. But you present this as, this is my view, and here's this author that supports it, and this is an excellent thing they say. Isn't that great? Because my idea is so good. This person thought of it too. Do you know what I mean? That's the way you're going to be presenting it. And then, you know, you'll look for other support as well, not just relying on one other paper. Okay? If you're going to be just doing what I said before and finding one source or one main citation and trying to step me through it, that doesn't give me the level of critical analysis that I would need. Okay, so you need to do a decent quantum of research. Like I said, paddle about, have a look in the literature, Because, you know, you will normally find, and I've said this from week one, you'll normally find that there is something that, you know, catches your eye or something that you would like to actually talk about. And it's normally just a matter of paddling about in the literature enough to find what that is. So by giving you these two questions, I've kind of roped off what the literature might be, and then you can have a little look at that and go forth from there. Like I said, don't be afraid to acknowledge that there are contrary views. If you wish to shoot them down, that's fine too. But I do need to hear your voice in all of this. Say what you're going to say, go through, put down what your narrative is going to posit, go through those issues, 1 to 3, conclude. Job done. Yes?
I think someone said it when I was doing a course a long time ago, it's say it, prove it, and then clinch it for each paragraph or topic that you're doing.
Say it, prove it, clinch it. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. And this would be my other really good tip. I know that everybody is super time poor, but if you can manage it, try and get your draft done a week early. And if you can, give it to a lay person to go through and read and chat to them about it and ask, did I convince you? Because that will give you a good clue as to whether you're concentrating too much on jargon and technicalities or whether you are actually making a point that other people can understand. Because most people will be able to pick up when someone is, like I said to you before, if you read a newspaper article, you can normally, just as an exercise in comprehension, you can normally work out what it is that they're trying to say. So enlist family, friends, partners, kids, and give yourself a bit of time once you've done that first cut to get opinions, feedback, and so forth. It's super useful. And you will also normally find that if you can put it down for a couple of days, because I always used to get so passionate about what I was writing about, you know, you'd get all hyped up and then you'd be way over the word count and you'd just be going, ah. If you can get that first draft down without too much worry of word count, leave it for a couple of days and then come back to it. And it's funny how the brain bubbles away, you know, whilst you're not actually thinking about what it is that a task that you've kind of half completed. Keeps thinking away, you know, and you'll come back to it. Guarantee it, if you put it down for a couple of days, come back to it, you'll have a fresh set of eyes again. And you'll see where you want to edit it down to make your point clearer. That's probably the best advice in terms of time stress, because if it's at all possible, people, I would really like for you to arrive at the 10th of June and submit having planned this last half of term out, so that you don't limp across that deadline on the 10th of June and go, oh, thank goodness, you know, that's done and dusted now. I would kind of like you to feel like you're guiding the ship into port and just getting off the gangway and going, that was awesome. Do you know what I mean? Can I help you with any more concrete things? No, you're all okay with literature searches and so forth. You know, for those that haven't done legal research, a good place as any to start is good old Google Scholar. Look at Google Scholar. You know, in some areas, like for example, I have one student is going to be, you know, writing. He's proposed a paper for me, which we're going to run with, and so he's made his own topic, but it happens to be in the area of patent law on a fairly specific issue. And he kind of said to me, where do I start? And I said, you know what, if you're coming really super fresh to a particular area, it can't even hurt. Do a Google search and see what practitioners in the area are saying about that issue. Because often you'll find, if you're thinking about patent law, you'll get patent attorneys putting out little information bulletins on their websites that do talk about all of this topical stuff. And I mean, I did a search just the other week about this issue when I was trying to work out, you know, the precise scope of where this student's research paper should go. And it might take you 5 or 10 minutes of Googling, but you can get a rough idea as to what the patent practitioners are saying about that issue. And from there, like I said, it was 5-10 minutes. There was already some decent leads in terms of proper scholarly articles that I'd gotten onto just by looking at these firm bulletins that were giving me an idea about what the debate was currently, where the debate had progressed to. And then you can swap over to the more scholarly stuff. You can look at Google Scholar. You can look at Westlaw. You can look at Lexis Advanced Pacific. And you can put some of those phrases that you've heard in the debates that you've just read about, you can put some of those phrases in, see what you get. The other resource, great resource, is that patents, if you're thinking particularly of patents or trademarks or related rights, like, you know, passing off and whatnot. The patents, trademarks and related rights database in the library is awesome, and that one is on Lexis Advanced Pacific. And I think in another Zoom tutorial, I did step you through how to get to that. But just for those who didn't see that tutorial, you go down to databases and you go to the Lexis one, Advanced Pacific, and then you go to, it's just a little bit tricky if you haven't worked with Lexis before, the Lexis database. Okay, so on the right-hand side, you'll see publications. And then down here, you see view all AU publications. So you just go to that. And then you go to P for patents. And there it is, table of contents, patents, trademarks, and related rights. Now, there is a counterpart to that one, which is copyright and related rights, although I don't think our library has a version of that, unfortunately. So if you are lucky enough to have access to other university websites, they might have it. Other university libraries, they might have it. But other than that, so far as copyright is concerned, the AG's website, Copyright Council, is also good for that kind of thing. Any queries on that stuff? Okay. Well, I guess it's kind of a case of go forth and conquer now, I would probably leave, just depending on where your preparation for your 50% assignment's going, I'd probably leave a couple of weeks to do your research and your paddling about in the literature. Don't forget also that my study guides in the latter weeks, will also give you a good heads up and some links as to where you should be looking, particularly if you're looking at IP reform. There's a decent set of links in the IP reform study guide. And if you're looking particularly about IP reform so far as fair dealing goes, then the Week 8 study guide, copyright and fair dealing, that will provide you with some initial leads for your research. So I hope that that's useful. Any other queries? Gemma's going to say something?
I was just going to say that that is useful. Thank you.
Oh, good. Oh, good. And don't forget, I'm here. You know, I'm here, and if you need some assistance in terms of looking for stuff, bouncing ideas, you know, saying where else could I look, please don't hesitate to give me a call or, you know, send me an email or post up something up on Moodle. That's absolutely fine too. And if you have like crazy ideas of arguments and you're just thinking, oh, you know, does that fly? Does it not fly? You know, just send me a very generalized, you know, summation of it, and I can say, look, no, you're wandering off into the blue sky. Or yes, you know, it sounds feasible as one of the issues that you wish to discuss. Obviously, I can't tell you, you know, this is going to be HD material or this is not or whatever. But you know, if I can try and help you, I will. Did anyone have any specific questions about? I think I'll probably end the recording now. If no one has any further queries, I'll just turn the recording off.